Boy, oh boy, I can't wait to pick up my product yellow iPhone 14 Plus. You know, you probably should just get a 13 Pro Max or even go back further. Like, I love my iPhone 10 and it's from 2017, way cheaper. Oh, okay, well, I'm still excited to pick up my M2 chip inside of an iPad Pro. You know, those newer iPads, they're really barely different from the 2018 iPad Pros, and you can get these for much cheaper anyway. Oh, okay, well, I'm at least excited to pick up my Apple Watch Series 8. You know, Series 8's really not that different from the Series 7, which, if I'm being honest, that's really not that different from the Apple Watch Series 5, which came out in 2019, and you can find that for much cheaper. It's starting to feel like you just want me to buy older, cheaper tech, so I guess you want me to buy a 2018 MacBook then? No. You okay? No. Are you all right? Sometimes that reviewing the older tech and recommending buying secondhand and refurbished stuff doesn't always hold up that much across all Apple categories. Yes, I very much encourage people to buy older iPads, older iPhones, even older Apple Watches, but when it comes to the Mac, I have a harder time recommending people go back further than the M1 MacBook Air. I've done many videos on that MacBook just because I think it's an incredible value. Even though I don't recommend you buy it new, you can find those for like low $700 if you're willing to go outside of refurbished options. You can even find them sub $600 now, and those just have such incredibly good battery life, such great performance, and a reliable keyboard, and I'm sure that those M1 MacBooks are still gonna get many more years of software support, so the value is just so hard to beat. But the weird part of this MacBook history, that we kind of go back further to the Intel days, is that Apple had kind of a phase, you know, like the emo teenage age, where they were like, no dad, I don't want to have a normal keyboard. I don't want to have legacy ports and MagSafe. I just want to go all in on USB-C, and I want to embrace my butterfly keyboard. It's not just a phase. This is just who I am, and you have to accept me. That essentially summarizes a lot of the MacBook Pro generation from 2016 all the way until 2019. And there's some decent deals you can find in the secondhand market, like once Apple switched back to the Magic Keyboard, which is what most people prefer, you do have a little 16-inch MacBook Pro Intel based in there that is definitely a lot cheaper than buying a brand new 16-inch MacBook Pro, but it's getting more and more difficult because there is rumored to be a 15-inch MacBook Air around the corner, and that's probably going to have far better battery life, far better efficiency, and of course, it'll bring back your precious MagSafe, which again, is not too important to me, but to the masses, based on lots of online discussion and from what Apple has discovered themselves, that's why they made these changes in the MacBook lineup, most people don't seem to be in love with the touch bar or in love with the butterfly keyboard. If that many people did love it, Apple probably wouldn't have gotten rid of it. So that's why I guess I take so much issue with recommending you go older than the M1 MacBook Air, because then it starts to get really, really specific about what you prefer. And I've run into people in my personal life that are like, you know, I'm on a budget, I don't want to drop $1,000 on this laptop, but I found a 2018 MacBook Air, or I found a 2017 MacBook Pro, and I'm curious, should I buy that for $500-600 used and save myself a couple $100 over an M1 Air? And I'm usually like, you know, I want people to save money and I want people to be more careful with their spending, but simultaneously, a lot of the compromises you're making with those older MacBooks are compromises on features that a lot of people appreciate. Like, even if you're not a video editor or a software engineer or an audio mixer or anything fancy like that, a lot of people tend to type on their laptops or use them on the go. So a lot of the weaknesses on those older MacBooks that you buy secondhand are the typing experience is not that great. There's more likely to be issues with that dated keyboard design, and hopefully Apple can cover you for a decent price with those keyboards, but it's kind of up in the air a lot of the time whether or not that generation of MacBook will get it fixed, and that's still a chore to have to take it to the Apple store and get it repaired and everything. And also those older MacBooks, because they're running Intel, they get hot really easily, and that chews into your battery life. So battery life and keyboard reliability are both both fairly important things to even everyday super casual laptop enjoyers. So that's why I tend to take issue with, like, yeah, I guess you could compromise and go with a lower end MacBook, but there was a lot of weird design choices Apple made in that 2016 to 2019 phase that are difficult to justify and hard to be like, yeah, I guess you could go with that, but it gets even more complicated if your budget is even tighter. So I know some people out there that are just, for whatever reason, no judgment at all, but they don't have that much money to spend on a laptop. Could be just a couple $100, but they like the Apple ecosystem and everything, and that's where kind of like the 2015 MacBook Pro enters the picture, because that's before Apple went all in on USB-C, and you still have your old traditional Magic keyboard design. You don't have the unreliable and super loud and clacky butterfly keyboard back then. You still have your MagSafe, which Apple has now brought back, so it feels like the 2015 MacBook Pro with the Retina display is honestly like more modern than the 2016 MacBook Pro, considering all the things they removed. But the issue with those older 2015 MacBook Pros is, well, now you're definitely not getting new software support. You're on an older version of macOS, so if your main motivation to getting a MacBook over like a Chromebook or some cheap Windows PC is, well, I want to be within the Apple ecosystem, well, those older MacBooks are already not getting support, so if you're using iMessage or whatever all the time, you can't really see the unsent messages or the iMessage effects, or AirDrop may not work as reliably on those older ones compared to the newer ones, or you're not gaining a lot of that ecosystem advantages like continuity camera or universal control, which people appreciate on the Mac. So a lot of the time on this channel, especially during live streams and stuff, people love to ask me, like, should I go for this used option at this lower price? And I can't really give a very easy blanket statement for a lot of these Macs, because it's always like, well, it depends. Why are you going for a MacBook in the $200 price range? Is it just because you like the chassis, like you like the aluminum, and you like that you can upgrade the RAM and the battery? Yeah, it's cool that you can retrofit them if you're comfortable taking them apart and that kind of thing, but if you're mainly going to be using it for like web browsing, just checking social media or managing your classes online, then I would question whether or not that is the appropriate purchase if an iPad that's far less money but still has way better silicon, way better battery life, that will get software support for much longer, could get the same job done, because it can play YouTube videos, you can check email, you can FaceTime, you can send texts, and you can browse the web from that. And honestly, the iPad will probably feel like a much more modern, streamlined experience, even if you gotta buy a cheap Logitech keyboard to go with it. Obviously, I take issue with iPads when it comes to more of the pro-end hardware, like the iPad has a lot of compromises once you want to start doing video editing or audio editing or software engineering, and yeah, you can do light versions of it on the iPad, but Apple's still at every corner gonna tell you, well, you should have bought a Mac and then you could have accessed all these other great things. So because of that weird phase in there where the keyboards are kind of whack and the Intel chips are really hot so the battery life is poor, that's hard to recommend, even though it is cheaper than the Apple Silicon era. But then if you're going ultra cheap in the $200 range, now you're missing out on a lot of that long-term software support and also not getting the best battery life. You'll probably get a more reliable keyboard experience, but because we're kind of in that phase where Apple has just refreshed like pretty much the entire Mac line and redesigned them from the inside out to be optimized for the ARM architecture, that puts the recommending last year's model topic in a weirder situation. So it comes really down to what you prioritize, and I definitely know people out there that have told me, I don't mind the butterfly keyboard, or I love the touch bar, and I'm all in favor of USB-C everything. So in that case, perhaps a 2018 MacBook Pro, butterfly keyboard and all, is still gonna work fine for you. And I hope it does, and I hope you can find it for a good price, but just acknowledging that most of the laptop market was not in favor of going all in with Type-C. Now Apple admitting that with the newer generation MacBooks and getting rid of the butterfly keys, getting rid of the touch bar, those clearly have been crowd pleaser choices. So it starts to get really niche with which exact model in which exact year makes the most sense for you. But ultimately, I don't take much issue with people wanting what I call Safari books, which are basically just like a Chromebook but made by Apple. But if web browsing and media consumption or document writing and basic stuff like that is really all you need it for, that's when I'm more likely to say, could you find like a older iPad Pro or even an iPad Air for sub $400 that can get that job done and probably last you a lot longer. Plus, if you're a student, this is probably going to be a lot more portable, good for note-taking with the stylus and everything. I wish Apple had something better for you, like a 2-in-1 hybrid for $300 or whatever, but you'll have to leave that to Microsoft, I'm afraid, and you'll have to suffer with Windows 11. But what do you guys think? Should the older generation MacBooks still be considered? What's the best Intel MacBook you can still buy in 2023? My vote is probably going to be the last one, which was the 2019 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro. Sure, it doesn't have the great performance of the newer MacBook Pros, but you can find those for like $1,000, and if you really just want a big screen that's mobile, that one has the more reliable Magic Keyboard, still has the touch bar if you like that, and the escape key if that's a die-hard feature that you want to keep around. And again, you can find them at pretty reasonable prices these days. They'll probably continue to get software supports for another 3 to 4 years, but honestly, I feel like most people should just focus on getting Apple Silicon in their lives as quickly as possible so that you can appreciate the extended battery life, the much quieter machines that don't sound like a 747 every time you turn them on, and not have to come back to this discussion of, well, okay, my old MacBook's not cutting it anymore. What do I upgrade to? What's a good price? I can acknowledge that a lot of us Apple sheep just like to pick a Mac and then stick with it for 5, 6, maybe 8 or 9 years, depending on how well you take care of it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I'll see you all in the next one.